Hello and welcome to Dragon Week, where a bunch of TTRPG content creators such as myself are making a ton of content themed around dragons. And we're going to start this off with painting one of the biggest models I own, the Ancient Red Dragon by WizKids. You can buy this model pre-painted already, but I picked it up unpainted because it was cheaper that way. Now this part I didn't film, but the easiest way to get a base coat that you can then add layers onto is to spray paint everything black, and then once that's dry, go over it with a red. Spray painting it black first and then adding your colors afterwards will make it have a darker shade. Now I'm showing you a bunch of paints that I'm using throughout this video. These are by no means the paints that you need to get. I'm just showing you the paints that I am using. And now that it's base coated red, we're going to go ahead and start painting the wings. Now for the wings, I went with this orangish color here, which is a contrast paint, which will go on very thin and nicely, and then we can add it in multiple thin coats and get it to the right consistency and the right kind of orangish color we want. I'm using what's called a contrast paint, which goes on very thin and it's almost runny like water, but it allows you to use multiple thin coats and build it up to the right consistency that you want, and it's also very forgiving, so if you get it in any wrong areas you want, you can easily wick it away with either a dry brush or even just your thumb. And I am using a fairly large brush because it is a fairly large model, and I'm always starting in the little corners and the recesses where I have the most paint on the brush, and then pulling that paint down away into the thinner edges around the outer tail edge of the wings. Also, if you're painting a model this big, make sure you paint it before you put it together. Don't be like me, because painting it with its wings already glued and attached is a nightmare. Now that the wings are painted and they have that nice little bit of an orangish hue to them that sets them apart from the rest of the skeletal body, now let's go ahead and paint the little fin area down his spine. Now lucky for me, the tail is still unattached, so I can do that separately. And don't worry if it looks extremely bright when it's going on like it does here, because as the paint dries, it will dull out. Next up, we're going to take this Xandiri dust, which is a little bit more of a brownish yellow color, and we're going to use that for the scales along his body. This is a proper paint consistency, so it'll go on quite thick. And already, just with the orange color on the wings and the scales painted on his body, he already looks pretty much ready for game night. Now we're going to take what I think is called Ushabti bone, I could be wrong, but nonetheless, and we're going to use it to paint out all the little bone protrusions he has, like his claws and his talons. Now this is a thicker paint, so you're going to really want to thin it out on the brush and apply as many thin coats as you think necessary. It is always easier to apply multiple thin coats and get it up to the thickness that you want than it is to apply one big thick coat and have to try and rub it down to the right consistency. And that warning again, as you can see here, do not glue massive models together before you paint them, because painting them becomes a nightmare. Putting it on your lap, twisting it about, and making sure nothing breaks. Just glue it all together after you've painted everything. And lastly, for bone parts, we're going to paint the two massive horns coming out of the top of his head. I also didn't mention, but you can see in the video, I put the little bit of that orange contrast on the fins coming out from his cheek as well. Now this next part isn't as necessary if you want to be quick and efficient, but I decided to paint around his mouth. I took Flesh Terror's Red, which is another contrast paint, so it's very thin and runny, and I put that inside his mouth, followed by Blood Angel's Red on his tongue. In truth, the differences in these two reds is so minute that you almost can't tell, but under right lights, yes, the Blood Angel's Red is a bit brighter than the Flesh Terror's Red, which is why I chose for the Blood Angel's Red to be the tongue, which will be more sunlight, and the Flesh Terror's Red to be in the back of his mouth. Now, after painting with so much contrast and red and oranges, we're going to wash out the paint pot and get some new paper towel, because we're going to be dry brushing soon, and we're going to want clean paper towel for that. Now I forgot to record this, but off camera I also painted his eyes. I tried starting out with white, but it didn't look as good as I was hoping, so I ended up going black with a yellow eye slit. It does look a little goofy, but you know what? None of us are ever going to paint eyes as well as we hope. So it's okay. If you're curious what I'm using to mix paints with, you might have seen it in a couple of shots in this video. This is what's called a vortex mixer. It's used mainly for science labs and such, where they're mixing chemicals together in small little mixing pots, but you can also use it incredibly well for mixing paint together. As you can see, this Baraknar Burgundy has a bit of a separation on the top layer where the pigments have actually separated from not being shaken or used in a while, but if you just put this on the vortex mixer with a little bit of force, it mixes mixes and shakes everything around very quickly and very rapidly, and you can see all the pigments immediately come together and the paint is completely usable once again. And for another demonstration, I show it here on the contour blue as well. You can see that it's separated near the top. After a few seconds in the mixer, it's completely back together. Now, yes, you can do this if you put some small little metal beads inside the painter pots and then just shake them around. That will also get the trick, and then it acts like a paint can, but vortex mixers save you a bunch of time and they're incredibly helpful. Unfortunately, vortex mixers are not as cheap as I would like them to be, but if you can find one cheap and you paint very often, I would highly recommend getting one. Next up, if you paint Warhammer models, or if you know anybody who paints Warhammer models, they will swear by this stuff. Nuln Oil is the best thing Citadel Paints has ever created. Now, it is kind of similar to the contrast paints we were using before, but this one's called a shade. What it's going to do is it's going to go on and it's going to look very, very dark, but once it dries out, it's just going to make all the shadows in your model look incredible. And you can apply this stuff very liberally. It will not ruin anything. It will only serve to enhance what you've already done. The one area I did not touch with the Nuln Oil is the actual skin of his wings, because I do want that to still look bright, like sunlight is still casting through it, but everywhere that's not the skin on his wings, I apply Nuln Oil. Once you're done with this, put your model in direct sunlight for a bit and let the Nuln Oil dry out. Because like I mentioned, it will look incredibly dark, but once it dries, it will brighten back up and it will just show that the recesses are dark, whereas the parts that are not recessed are bright, and it will give so much more texture and contour to your model. And now we do the final step, which is honestly my favorite part, and that's dry brushing. We're going to take this bright red called Mephiston red, and we're going to dry brush, which is where you load up a small little brush. You can honestly use makeup brushes for this. These work incredibly well. And you're going to rub out most of the paint of the brush onto your paper towel until it's just leaving small streaks on the paper towel. And then you're just going to slather it onto the model just where it catches the raised edges and nothing else. And we're going to do the exact same idea here with the Ushabti bone on top of his skin scales things. Load up our brush, rub most of it off in the paper towel, and then just go up and down, catching the raised edges of his scales. You can really see the effect dry brushing has here. And with that, I think this guy is table ready and good to go for game night. Again, this is for beginners like myself who just want to get something from unpainted to tabletop ready for game night. And I think this is way more than you would ever need to do for your friends to be excited to play with the model. If you really want to, you could go back in and get a lot more details out of it, but if you're just looking to get something ready in a couple of hours for game night tonight on a crunch, this will absolutely do it. And if you're worried that it doesn't look as good as you'd hoped, or that your friends are going to be upset by it, don't be. The moment you place this model in front of your party for game night, they are going to be terrified and also amazed. Thank you for watching. This has been fun doing something as part of the bigger TTRPG community. I'm trying to get more involved with other content creators, and this is an incredible thing, so thank you very much to Pointy Hat and Ginny D for making this. If you want to see more videos from Dragon Week, here are some videos on screen from other creators who are making awesome content. Be sure to give them a watch and tell them that Wingless sent you. Thank you very much, and have yourself a great Dragon Week.